Hey everybody, this is Brian Healy with Tucker Power Sports. Today we're going to help you assemble your new e-mountain bike from Fantic. Let's go! First of all, we are super excited to be the exclusive distributor for Fantic bikes here in the United States. Whether you're a bicycle dealer, power sports dealer, or an end user who purchased off the internet, this is how your Fantic bike arrives, in a giant box. Before you assemble your bike, you'll want to make sure the orientation of your box is correct. In order to do that, you have two arrows on the side. Those are pointing upward, and then you can be like me and you just take a quick glance and make sure that Fantic is right side up. Before we start assembly, I want to make sure that if you feel uncomfortable assembling your new bicycle, that you consider taking it to one of our authorized Fantic dealers or even your local bicycle shop. It's very important to properly assemble your bike in terms of safety and fun. So now we're ready for assembly. The first thing you're going to need is a quality set of tools. First and foremost, you want to make sure that you have a quality bike stand. A bike stand should be able to withstand about 55 to 60 pounds worth of weight, which is what these e-mountain bikes weigh. Second, you're going to want to make sure you have a quality torque wrench. All the bolts on this bike are all etched with the Newton meters that you're going to need to torque it to. It's very important to make sure those torque properly. Second, you're going to need to have some Allen wrenches. 4, 5, and 6 is usually what we use, and a T25 Torx wrench. Finally, what we call a pedal wrench or a 15mm box wrench would get you through assembly. And then finally, a quality bicycle pump and also a fork or shock pump that we'll show you later in the assembly process. All right, so now that you have the tools, it's time to open up the box and see what's inside. The first thing you'll find are two smaller packages. The first package is going to contain a set of LED lights as well as some reflectors. We'll look at those a little bit later. We're going to set those aside. Next box or package that you're going to see is going to be your charger, your set of pedals, as well as your user manual. And again, we'll take a look at these a little bit later. Next up, you're going to have some bubble wrap, which we've removed already, but we're also going to pull out the front wheel, which is also wrapped in bubble wrap. For now, we're just going to set this aside and we'll come back to it during assembly. All right, so now you're ready to take the bike out of the box. Before you do that, to prepare it for the bike stand, you're going to want to extend the seat post. In order to do that, the handlebar is accessible right at the top of the box. You want to find the lever, extend the seat post, and then you can pull the entire bike out of the box and set it on the ground. And now that you have it on the ground, you can remove the box. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and open this box, get our charger out. And what I like to do is I like to charge the bike while it's being assembled. The charge port is located on the left side. You just pop the cover off and you'll have access to the port. You'll take the charging port tip and then we'll plug it in as we put it up on the stand. So now I have the charger plugged into the bike. I'm now going to turn the bike around and get it ready for the bike stand. So the bike is plugged in, now it's time to put it up into the stand. Again, these bikes are very heavy, so if you need someone to help you put it up onto the stand, would be a great time to call somebody in. Otherwise, just like me, just huck it up in there and bolt it in. Okay, so now it's time. We can go ahead and take off some of this bubble wrap, and then we're gonna put the handlebars onto the stem. So now we have the bubble wrap off, we can go ahead and start the assembly of the handlebars. In order to do that, we have a steering stem that has 4 bolts on the front of the stem. Those bolts are 4mm. They need to be removed to access the front plate and remove that. Once you take the front plate off, the handlebar itself has several small notches to help center it, and as you can clearly see here, It's going to help you do the rise and the twist of the bars, which will set a little bit later. All right, so now we have the handlebars loosely mounted. We'll go ahead and dial those in just a little bit. Now we're going to go ahead and mount the front wheel. On the front wheel, you're going to notice you have your disc brake. That disc brake needs to be oriented to the rider's left side to fit up into the caliper. You're then going to want to take your maxle out. The maxle is a quick release type axle, so you'll actually unhook the lever, and then you'll have to counterclockwise or loosen the thread and pull the axle out. We then just fit the wheel up in, slide the axle in, and tighten her up. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put air in the tires. Typically I put in about 25-30 psi, but depending on your trail conditions, the tire that you're running, those may change, but just for the sake of assembly, we're going to go ahead and start with 25. You're going to want to use a quality floor pump that has a press-to-valve end on it, because these are press-to-valve valve stems. And then we'll move to the back. So now we're going to go ahead and install the pedals. On each of the pedals, you're going to notice that there's a stamped designation of which side it is. So one pedal will have an R, one pedal will have an L. So obviously R equals right and L equals left. The threading on each of those are pretty specific, and that's why they're designated that way. The other thing is, for the assembly video here, we're not going to use any grease. We don't have that available to us right now. But you're going to want to go ahead and use like a copper grease or just a traditional grease on each of the pedal's threads before you insert them into the crank arms. So we're going to go ahead and find out which one's the left pedal, which one's the right pedal, and then we'll go ahead and show you guys how we put those on. Okay, so we have the right pedal. One way to consider how we thread these on is by the direction of the pedal stroke. So the pedal on the right-hand side moves in a clockwise rotation. So the right pedal will thread on clockwise, whereas the left pedal will be moving in a counterclockwise position or motion. So therefore the left pedal will actually thread on reverse of that, so it'll be counterclockwise. So we're going to go ahead and install these, and then we'll go ahead and take the bike off the stand. So now that we have the pedals threaded on, we're going to go ahead and tighten those down with a pedal wrench. We use a 15mm Park Tool pedal wrench because of how narrow or thin it is. You could use a box wrench if you have one of those in your toolboxes, but you've got to worry about the clearance. So that's why this is such a great tool, because of how thin it is. Again, the right side pedal is going to tighten clockwise. And the left side crank arm is going to go ahead and tighten counterclockwise. All right, so we don't put a lot of torque onto the pedals themselves, but what I like to do is, once the bike's assembled and I have it on the ground, I'll go ahead and just give it a quick check to make sure that everything's nice and tight. Okay, so now we have general assembly completed. What I'd like to do now is to do the fine-tuning things, adjust the handlebars slightly. We also need to, very important stage is to put air in the front forks. You will need a shock pump. Shock pump is going to be a high pressure pump. So that's anywhere between 100, 300 PSI. You're going to need to have one of those to finish up the final assembly of the bike. Once we do the fine-tuning of the handlebars here, I'm going to go ahead and remove the bike from the stand, and then we'll do the shock and the fork to make sure we have enough air in it. What I try to do is I just set it up generally in the center. So with all these lines that we have, as you guys can see here on the screen, I just try to center that up, make sure that our width is exactly the same on each side. I also then go ahead and make sure we torque these to spec, which for this particular bike, it's 6 Newton meters. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna gently tighten these down, and then I'm gonna get the torque wrench and we'll torque those down. So what we're gonna wanna do is we're gonna snug these in, do a cross pattern, make sure that your gap is the same from the top to the bottom of the stem plate. So I like to start in the top left, go down to the bottom right, go up to the top right, and finish with the bottom left. Just get those snugged. We're gonna torque these down to 6 Newton meters. And for setting, I'm gonna go ahead and do a generalized setting. And what that means is, I'm gonna try to get this center line right in the middle of this base plate. You can see this opening. You're gonna wanna go ahead and have that in the center. You're gonna also wanna try to get the width to be equal on both sides. This is generalized. You'll go ahead and tailor that to each rider if they need it. But for now, we're just gonna go ahead and put it in the middle. Once we have those snugged down, we're gonna go ahead and finalize the torque with the Park Tools torque wrench. These are 6 Newton meters, so it's a very light amount of torque. So that's why the quality torque wrench is so important. So we're gonna go ahead and do the same cross pattern. I'm gonna go ahead and start at the top left, go to the bottom right, again on the top right, and finish on the bottom left. And that's your handlebar. All right, we're almost there. So now we're gonna go ahead and take the bike off the stand, and we're gonna fill the fork with some air and check that. And we will also check the rear shock to make sure there's enough air in the rear shock. Okay, so now we're ready to put air in the front fork and check the rear shock. In order to do that, you're gonna need a shock pump. It's pretty specific. This one, for example, goes from 0 PSI up to 400 PSI. Typically what you'll wanna do is each fork is a little different depending on the model that you're gonna ride. Go ahead and check with rockshocks.com and check your specific fork for how much air for your body weight and your trail riding that you're gonna do. For this particular fork and this rear shock, the front fork, we're gonna start out at around 85 PSI, 85, 90 PSI. And then the rear shock, a real easy equation is whatever your body weight is with gear is a great place to start for the air pressure. So on the rear shock of this bike, I'm gonna start it out at 195. On the left fork tube, there's a cap. It says air on it, so it's pretty easy to figure out. You go ahead and remove that cap, set that aside. And then you just literally screw on the shock pump end so you can put air into the fork. And so this one is reading at 60 PSI, so obviously we need to raise that up a little bit. So it does have a little bit of air in it. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna add about 10 PSI and I'm gonna cycle the forks up and down just a little bit. And then I'm going to take it finally to, again, 85, 90 PSI. One of the cool things about a fork pump or shock pump is that it doesn't release a lot of air once you unthread it from the fork. So once we do this, you're not going to lose 10 PSI or 20 PSI. So you might lose a little bit, but it's not very much at all. You can hear it come out a little bit. And then we just put our cap back on. And again, I just like to cycle the forks just a little bit. And you're good. Now for the rear shock, there's a small little air nozzle on the top of the body of the shock. You're gonna go ahead and take the cap off. Set that aside. Same thing here, we're gonna thread it on. Your shock should come pretty full of air. It's probably gonna be around 180 or so. And again, when you thread it off, you hear a little air escape. That's quite okay. Then you just put your cap back on. So final assembly is now complete. All we have to do is check our battery charge. Once we see that it's fully charged, we can go ahead and unplug it. In order to check the charge, there is a power button right in the middle of the battery pack, which is right here where my finger is. We're gonna go ahead and turn that on. We're gonna see that there are 4 green lights, which means fully charged. We can go ahead and then unplug your charging unit, replace the cap. All right, so now you're ready to ride. Before you go, I have a few final thoughts I'd like to share with you. Again, we are super excited at Tucker Power Sports to offer you Fantic e-mountain bikes. The e-mountain bike culture is exploding, as everyone knows. If you're an analog rider or you're just a first-time mountain bike rider, e-mountain bikes are amazing. Personally, I've had experience with e-mountain bikes. I can't tell you how much fun it is until you actually get out there and experience it for yourself. The first thing I would like you guys to all do is to get on the Fantic app. You can download that via your Android or iPhone. Once you download the Fantic app, there's a bunch of really great stuff like GPS, it'll map your rides. It'll also show you different trails within your demographic. So if you're in Ohio like we are, it'll show you different maps of different trails that are out there. We appreciate your interest in Fantic e-mountain bikes. We hope that you get down to your local dealer, whether that's a power sports dealer or a bicycle dealer that carries the Fantic brand, and get a chance to experience the e-mountain bike culture and enjoy this brand as much as we do.